On a quiet evening in early March, Alex Parker sat in his small apartment preparing for what he believed would be another ordinary night of streaming. His room was his creative world, decorated with warm lighting, favorite gaming posters, and a high-end computer setup that he had slowly built over several years. His viewers loved the environment he created. It felt friendly, safe, and always full of good energy. Alex was not the biggest streamer online, but he was growing fast. He had a loyal audience, many of whom returned to his channel every night just to hear his voice and share a few laughs after long days at work or school. At exactly 10 p.m., Alex went live. Within minutes, the viewer count jumped to nearly 8,000. His chats filled with greetings, jokes, and excitement about what he would play that night. Alex smiled into the camera, adjusting his microphone. He looked relaxed and happy, unaware that this night would become the most unforgettable and disturbing broadcast of his life. He started playing a popular multiplayer game, commentating as usual, laughing at mistakes, reacting dramatically to tricky moments, and interacting with fans like he always did. Many viewers later described this part of the stream as perfectly normal. Nothing seemed strange or out of place. Alex looked healthy, calm, and focused. About an hour into the stream, some viewers noticed a subtle but unsettling change. The screen froze for a split second before returning to normal. A few thought it was their internet connection acting up. Others joked about it in the chat. Alex shrugged it off and continued playing. But a couple of sharp-eyed viewers later said that during that freeze, they thought they saw a shadow pass behind Alex in the corner of the frame. At the time, nobody gave it much attention. Every streamer experienced occasional visual glitches. It was nothing unusual, or so everyone thought. As the night went on, Alex's conversation with viewers grew more personal. He talked about improving his channel, about traveling one day, about wanting to make content full-time. He sounded optimistic, full of future plans. The warmth in his voice made the viewers feel like they were part of his world. That connection was one reason his channel had grown so quickly. People trusted him. At the 2-hour mark, the atmosphere changed. The stream froze again, this time longer and more noticeably. The screen pixelated and flickered for several seconds, then returned to normal. Alex's expression looked slightly confused. He looked off camera as if he heard something, then forced a smile and resumed talking. A few viewers commented that he seemed distracted. Some thought someone might have entered the room. But again, nothing happened that could confirm it. He kept playing, although he looked less relaxed than before. 10 minutes later, everything changed. Alex was about to enter a new game match when a loud crash echoed from somewhere in his apartment. The sound was so sudden and violent that many viewers instinctively flinched behind their screens. Alex jumped in his chair, eyes widening. He turned his head sharply toward his bedroom door, mouth slightly open, as if trying to understand what he had just heard. "Hello," he called out. It was not the casual tone a person used when a roommate or friend walked in. It was a voice filled with sudden fear. The chat exploded. Messages flew in non-stop. "Is someone in your house? Call the police." "Alex, what is happening?" But Alex did not see the chat. His focus was on something off-camera. Another loud noise followed, this time closer, as if someone had shoved furniture aside. Alex stood up quickly. The camera on his desk shook as his knee bumped the table. The screen angle tilted slightly downward, no longer showing his face clearly. He stepped out of frame, voice rising in panic. Viewers heard him say, "Who's there? I'm streaming. Get out." His voice cracked at the end. What happened next became one of the most rewatched moments across social media for days. A heavy thud came from inside the room, followed by a sound like a struggle. Something metallic hit the floor. The camera shook again and then toppled sideways. The lens now captured the lower half of the room at a slanted angle. From the new position, viewers could only see the chair, part of the carpet, and the corner of the apartment doorway. The screen showed a pair of legs enter the frame, dark pants, heavy shoes, no face visible. Alex's voice let out a desperate cry, then became muffled as if someone had covered his mouth. A final scream echoed through the microphone before the entire live stream suddenly cut to black. Some viewers stared at their screens, unsure if they had just witnessed a planned horror skit or something real. Others instantly panicked, believing they had seen an actual crime take place in real time. People tried refreshing the page, checking Alex's other social media accounts, and messaging him privately. But everything remained silent. Within minutes, thousands began posting clips online. The video spread across platforms as the shocking stream reached millions of views in just hours. Comment sections turned chaotic with arguments and speculation. Many believed it was a publicity stunt to get attention. Others argued that Alex's voice sounded too terrified to be acting. A few viewers even called local authorities, reporting that a live streamer might be in danger. Police officers in Alex's city responded surprisingly quickly. They arrived at his apartment just before midnight. At this point, no one knew what they would find. When officers entered the apartment, they expected to discover Alex streaming live or setting up some dramatic prank, but instead they found a silent, empty space. The computer in the corner was still on, the chair knocked over, the microphone broken on the floor, and a lamp lying on its side. The gaming stream page was still open on the screen, but no broadcast was active. It was clear the apartment had been disturbed recently, but Alex was nowhere inside. Nothing explained where he had gone. Police conducted a quick search of the building, questioning neighbors. Some reported hearing strange noises but thought it was just someone moving furniture late at night. Others remembered hearing a muffled yell but assumed it came from a loud video game stream. No one had seen anyone enter or leave his apartment. Investigators quickly realized they were not dealing with a prank or staged video. The stream's viewers might have witnessed a real abduction as it happened. The seriousness of the situation grew rapidly. Media outlets picked up the story by morning. Headlines spoke of a streamer who had vanished while thousands watched helplessly. Online theories multiplied. Some believed a jealous rival had targeted him. Others thought he had been involved in dangerous online activities. A few insisted it was all a marketing stunt and that Alex would reappear with a shocking reveal. But the police were not interested in theories. They had a missing person case with an enormous digital audience as witnesses. What made the situation even more disturbing was one detail no one yet understood. When detectives examined the computer more carefully, they discovered the stream had not actually been live at the moment of the attack. The discovery that Alex's live stream was not actually live at the time of the apparent attack changed the tone of the investigation immediately. What had originally looked like a real-time crime unfolding before thousands of viewers now shifted into something far stranger and more calculated. Detectives who had expected to review live data now realized they were dealing with a crime that had been carefully planned and scheduled in advance. Someone wanted the world to believe they were watching Alex's disappearance in real time, and they had gone to great lengths to make sure of it. Digital forensics experts were brought in to examine Alex's computer in detail. The desktop, once a place of creativity for gaming and content creation, now looked like a battlefield of information. Files were scattered, programs left open, and half-edited documents sat waiting on the screen. One thing that stood out immediately was the streaming software. The log files showed no record of live capture during the supposed broadcast. Instead, they showed that a pre-recorded video file had been uploaded and scheduled to air automatically. This meant Alex was not in front of his audience during the attack. He had already been taken before the stream ever went public. This revelation raised chilling questions. If Alex was not present during the broadcast, then someone else had physically come to his apartment earlier, staged the scene, and created the illusion of a live struggle that would play out later. They wanted viewers to see the attack at a specific time, ensuring maximum impact and confusion. Whoever planned it was not impulsive but patient and methodical. They wanted attention, fear, and chaos. With that realization, investigators dug deeper. One of the digital analysts began sorting through Alex's folders, hoping to find personal projects, conversations, or clues that might explain what he had been involved in. At first, the files looked typical for a content creator: video editing projects, thumbnails, Photoshop layers, gaming clips, and sponsorship notes. But then, buried inside a seemingly harmless folder labeled Taxes 2023, they found an encrypted folder titled Do Not Touch. The folder immediately raised suspicion. They had never seen Alex as someone who used encryption casually. To hide something like this meant he had been protecting something very important. With court authorization and heavy computing power, the team began breaking the encryption. It took several hours of running powerful cracking tools, but by evening, the folder finally opened. Inside it were dozens of text logs, screenshots, and files filled with messages from a user calling themselves Reaper 17. The messages were threatening and cold. The early ones demanded that Alex stop looking into things that were not his business. Others accused him of stealing information or preparing to expose secrets that were better left alone. Some messages became more direct and menacing. "You were warned. This is your last chance. We can make you disappear." One of the final messages read, "You will pay with silence." Detectives stared at the screen, realizing Alex had been under threat long before the night of the livestream. He had not shared this with his friends, family, or even his audience. He had been dealing with something dark and secret. The presence of encrypted files suggested that Alex had known how dangerous the situation was and had been preparing for something big. Investigators continued sorting through the folder and found several screenshots of financial spreadsheets and donation transactions that didn't make sense for a gaming streamer. Large amounts of money were being transferred through online platforms under the appearance of charity or sponsorship, but moved through shell accounts before vanishing into offshore systems. It appeared Alex had uncovered illegal financial activity hidden behind the streams. Someone had been using their online presence to launder money, and Alex had stumbled onto it. Among the screenshots was another interesting discovery: recent receipts for small hidden cameras, audio devices, and data storage cards. Alex had bought them only days before his disappearance. He was not preparing to simply report what he found. He was preparing to record evidence. The receipts were from local stores, dated just 2 days before the broadcast. This indicated Alex had decided to document something himself. Whatever he had discovered had convinced him that he could not trust normal channels, that he needed his own proof. Detectives turned their attention to his desktop again. They checked the file properties of the pre-recorded livestream footage. The metadata showed that the video had been edited shortly before Alex vanished. He had added quick cuts, camera angles, and subtle background visuals. The video appeared normal at first, but with close inspection, they noticed things viewers would never have focused on in the chaos. Small items in the background that changed position during the stream, quiet sounds in the audio track that did not match Alex's actions, and an odd reflection on the glass window behind him during a freeze frame. It looked like there were hidden messages embedded within the video itself. Alex had tampered with the footage, and not by accident. One of the audio specialists cleaned and enhanced the background noise in the segment just before the staged attack in the video. Faintly, underneath the game audio, there was a soft whisper, almost impossible to hear under normal volume. When enhanced, it became clear enough to understand. "If you are watching this, they already got me." The room fell silent when investigators listened to it. Alex had left a warning for whoever might later analyze the video. He knew he was at risk even before the stream began. The team now faced a haunting timeline. Alex had discovered criminal activity. He had tried collecting evidence. The criminals knew he was digging too deep and warned him. Alex continued anyway, planning to expose them. They abducted him before he could release anything, then used his own channel to simulate the crime in front of the world as a final message. The staged livestream was not only about terror but about power. It was a declaration that they were in control. But the most puzzling part of the digital search had not yet been uncovered. As a final sweep, forensic specialists checked the location logs on Alex's hard drive. They found a trail of GPS data from a small external SSD that had been connected to his computer earlier in the week. The drive had last been used 2 nights before the fake livestream aired. It had traveled to an area on the outskirts of the city. There was no record of what Alex did there. No files referenced it directly. It was a missing piece of the puzzle, one that would become important later. Before shutting down the computer for the night, one of the investigators noticed something else. Alex's editing software showed a file that had been scheduled for a later release, something that never aired. The file name was simple but chilling: Proof. Alex had been planning something big. Whatever was inside that file was supposed to change everything, but it had vanished without a trace. Someone had deleted it before the police arrived. The evidence on the hard drive confirmed one thing beyond any doubt. Alex had been aware of the danger, but he refused to back down. He believed in what he had found, and he was willing to risk himself to expose the truth. Whoever took him was not only trying to silence him but trying to erase whatever he had discovered. But they had failed to erase everything. Pieces remained scattered across the digital landscape, waiting for the right eyes to find them. And those pieces would soon lead investigators to secrets far bigger and far darker than anyone expected. The investigation into Alex Parker's disappearance took a sharp turn once detectives began interviewing the people closest to him. His family lived several cities away, and had not spoken to him in the days before the alleged livestream. They were shocked and terrified when police delivered the news. His parents insisted that Alex had always been careful, focused on building his online career, and was not the kind of person to get involved in anything dangerous. But his friends, especially those who streamed or gamed with him regularly, painted a different and far more complicated picture. Alex's closest friend, Jamie Wells, was the first to reveal that something had been bothering Alex in the weeks before he vanished. Jamie and Alex spoke almost every day, sometimes during streams, sometimes privately. Jamie explained that Alex had sounded distracted recently, sometimes even nervous, as if he was constantly watching his surroundings. He would ask strange questions, such as whether Jamie thought certain online influencers had real connections to criminal groups, or whether she believed that major streaming sponsors could be involved in illegal operations behind the scenes. At first, Jamie assumed Alex was planning to create a documentary-style video about corruption in online communities, the kind of expose meant to draw millions of views. Alex had been talking about doing more serious, investigative content, something different from simple gaming streams. She believed this was just a new creative direction. She never imagined he was actually digging into something dangerous. Detectives asked Jamie to come down to the station for a formal interview. During that conversation, Jamie hesitated several times before finally telling them the truth. 2 weeks before Alex disappeared, he had confessed to her that he had discovered something troubling. He told her he had accidentally opened a set of files that were not meant for him. He had been collaborating with a mid-sized streamer on a joint charity event. Something went wrong with one of the donation files, and in the process of repairing the corrupted spreadsheet, Alex saw names, financial transfers, and account numbers that did not match the amounts the charity had publicly claimed. At first, he thought it might be a mistake, but curiosity led him deeper, and he discovered other transactions connected to different streamers who worked with the same circle of sponsors. Alex began digging further, and the more he looked, the more irregularities he found. Donations that appeared to go to medical funds or wildlife charities were actually being routed through multiple small accounts, then cashed out overseas. Sponsorship deals that looked legitimate on the surface were masking suspiciously large payments for almost no work. In one case, a streamer was paid more than $50,000 for a single 30-second video ad. The company that paid him did not even have a functioning product website. Something was wrong, and Alex knew it. Jamie told investigators that Alex initially thought he had uncovered a tax scam. Maybe a group of streamers were working together to hide income or illegally reduce their taxes. But as Alex followed the financial trail, he began to realize the activity was much bigger and more organized than that. These transactions were not amateurish. They were smooth, consistent, and far too structured to be casual fraud. This was professional money laundering hidden within the streaming world, taking advantage of the massive online financial flow that millions of viewers never questioned. To the audience, it looked like people donating to good causes, streamers succeeding, sponsorship deals thriving. In reality, someone was moving large sums of money through the internet while most people never noticed. When Alex confronted the streamer he had partnered with, he received a message that chilled him. "Stop digging," the message read. "This is bigger than you. Just stream and forget what you saw." Alex tried to laugh it off when he told Jamie about it, but she said that afterward, he changed. He became more cautious, more alert. He started locking his apartment door more often and checking the street before going outside. He set up new two-factor authentications on all his accounts. He even bought 2 small security cameras, which Jamie assumed were for vlogging or improving his stream setup. Now detectives realized he was purchasing them for surveillance. Jamie also revealed that Alex had started recording phone calls and online meetings. He believed that if he gathered enough evidence, he could take it to the authorities or go public with a viral video that would expose everything. He was convinced that once people saw the truth, the criminals hiding behind gamer profiles and online charity fronts would be brought down. But Alex had underestimated who he was up against. He believed he was dealing with a small group of corrupt influencers. Instead, he had stumbled onto a highly coordinated criminal operation that had been operating unnoticed for years. Detectives asked Jamie if Alex had shared any physical evidence with her. After thinking for several moments, she remembered that Alex once gave her a small encrypted file and told her to keep it safe. He did not explain what it was, only that if anything ever happened to him, she should give it to the police. Jamie had shrugged off the warning at the time, believing Alex was exaggerating for dramatic effect or getting too deep into his story ideas. She had stored the file on an unopened flash drive in her desk drawer. The police immediately obtained the flash drive and sent it to digital forensics. Inside, analysts found partial financial records and screenshots linking several high-profile streamers to offshore shell companies. There were usernames, transaction IDs, dates, and amounts. Some of the documents showed transfers between donations made in live streams and bank accounts in countries known for weak financial regulations. It was only a small portion of what Alex had uncovered, but it was enough to bring serious attention to the case. What made the situation even more disturbing was that these criminals had become aware of Alex long before his disappearance. The threatening messages from Reaper 17 were not random harassment from trolls. This was someone deeply involved in the operation, someone who had accessed Alex's files and knew what he had found. That meant they likely also knew who Alex had spoken to, what he had recorded, and where he might have stored evidence. Detectives now believed that Alex had realized he was being watched, and that was why he began setting up hidden cameras. He was planning to capture proof not only of the fraud but possibly of a face-to-face confrontation. The small cameras he purchased had motion sensors and tiny storage cards. If someone entered his apartment without his knowledge, the cameras would start recording. He was preparing for the worst while trying to expose the truth. Jamie had one more important detail to share. 2 days before the staged livestream aired, Alex sent her a short, encrypted voice message. It was scrambled and distorted, but after Jamie replayed it several times, she understood one clear sentence: "If something happens to me, the evidence will be on stream." At that time, she had no idea what that meant. She thought Alex was planning some dramatic storytelling twist for a new video series. Now, with everything that had happened, those words took on an entirely different meaning. The police realized Alex had not planned to show his evidence directly. Instead, he was going to hide it inside the livestream itself. That meant the pre-recorded broadcast was not just a dramatic kidnapping scene. It was a digital puzzle, a message, a last attempt to reveal the truth in a way that could not easily be destroyed. Investigators re-examined the livestream through a new lens. The camera angle, the items on the shelves behind him, the whiteboard partially in view, the reflections in glass, all of it could be part of a bigger message that Alex hoped someone would notice after he was gone. It was now clear that the staged attack was only half of the story. The other half had been encoded and hidden, waiting for the right eyes to see it. Alex had not only been investigating a criminal network, he had been trying to outsmart them. And what he left behind would soon lead detectives to the darkest part of the streaming world, one that most viewers had never imagined existed. The city moved through its days unaware that a storm was building beneath its polished skyline, one that was about to change every assumption about the safety people took for granted. Detective Harris had come to understand that nothing about this case was accidental. Every lead that seemed straightforward turned into smoke the moment he tried to grab hold of it, as if the killer had anticipated every police response before it was even considered. For Harris, who had worked homicides for more than 2 decades, this case was turning into something that stuck in his head long into the quiet hours of the night. The killer was organized, intelligent, and frighteningly patient, the kind of adversary law enforcement quietly feared but never wanted to admit existed. By the time the 4th victim had been discovered, the only remaining question was not whether the killer would strike again, but how soon. The 4th crime scene was different from the earlier ones in ways that immediately pulled Harris away from the idea that these murders were merely part of an uncontrolled spiral. The victim, a woman in her early 30s, was found in her own apartment, the locks intact, no signs of forced entry, and only the faintest trace of a struggle. She had been approached calmly or by someone she trusted enough to open her door. Or perhaps the killer had learned how to slip into a locked residence without leaving a mark. Even worse, the apartment had been cleaned, not pick by pick with obsessive precision, but carefully enough that the killer was not only avoiding detection, but taunting the investigators with the fact that they could not prove what they already knew. Harris walked slowly through the room, taking in every detail. The faint smell of perfume still hung in the air, as if the victim had only been alive minutes earlier. A teacup sat beside a half-read book on the kitchen counter, as though time had simply stopped rather than been stolen. Harris leaned over the dining room table, staring at a handwritten note left behind. The killer never wrote anything before. It was a brief, chilling message in looping neat handwriting, not threatening but conversational, as if the killer were beginning a dialogue. Harris recognized the psychological escalation immediately. The killer had grown bold. They were done hiding in shadows. They wanted acknowledgement. They wanted a dance. The note read, "We are both chasing the truth. Only one of us will like what we find." It was the kind of message that played on a detective's mind, like a whisper that never faded. Harris pocketed the evidence carefully, knowing that the killer had meant for him to see it. It was the first tangible message directed at him personally, and it changed the nature of the case instantly from pursuit to contest. As forensic teams worked the scene, Harris sat alone in the living room, replaying everything he had learned so far. Victim selection was not random. The first three had shared no personal connections, but psychologically, they were aligned. Driven, ambitious, isolated from close friends or family. They were individuals who could vanish from the world without someone raising alarm immediately. But this fourth victim was different. She had parents living across town, co-workers who adored her, friends who texted her daily. Killing someone like that was not just confidence. It was a statement, a message that the killer no longer feared discovery. Either they believed themselves untouchable, or they were becoming desperate for the world to recognize what they were doing. With serial offenders, escalation was expected, but this was rapid, almost aggressive acceleration. Something had changed for the killer psychologically, and Harris needed to understand what before another body was found. In the days that followed, the media erupted. Press conferences, police statements, investigative panels. Theories from every corner of the city flooded the conversation. The news anchors spoke with alarmed urgency, warning citizens to stay vigilant. Social media platformed armchair detectives trying to build theories from fragments of rumor and publicly released evidence. The city had officially woken up to the fact that a serial murderer was walking its streets. Every night, people locked their doors and checked their windows twice. Every strange movement in the hallway or unexpected knock on the door made residents freeze. Fear had become as much a part of daily life as morning coffee and evening traffic. Harris knew that public panic could be dangerous. Fear created chaos. Chaos created mistakes. And mistakes created opportunities for killers who thrived in confusion. Meanwhile, Harris and his small task force continued working long nights, pouring through investigative files, victim histories, and psychological analyses. They brought in experts who specialized in criminal profiling, forensic linguistics, and behavioral tracking. One profile stood out immediately. The killer was likely male, socially invisible, intelligent, meticulous, and accustomed to sitting in the background. Someone who had watched, studied, and planned before ever striking. The note, however, revealed something new. Linguistically, the tone suggested someone who viewed this not as murder, but as a philosophical mission, a test of who deserved to uncover the truth of human nature. This was not someone killing impulsively. This was someone who believed they were proving something. As days passed, Harris found himself unable to shake the feeling that the killer was always one step ahead. He replayed the message in his mind each night before falling asleep. The words were not taunts. They were warnings. Whoever this was, they believed Harris would eventually reach the truth, but that truth would destroy him. The unsettling thing was that Harris was beginning to sense the possibility that the killer was right. There was something wrong beneath the ordinary rhythm of the city. Something hidden. Something powerful. Maybe the killer was trying to expose it. Maybe the victims were not random, but pieces in a larger pattern that law enforcement had not yet seen. Late one evening, while the city lights glowed beyond his office window, Harris discovered a link no one else had noticed. All four victims had worked, at some point, on community development committees connected to the same private foundation. The foundation was wealthy, influential, and closed to scrutiny. Its function was officially philanthropic, but the more Harris researched, the more inconsistencies he found. Financial records that did not align, shell organizations registered offshore, sudden changes in board membership, and large sums moving through channels that made no logical sense. Harris felt his pulse steady as the picture began to form. The killer did not choose victims because they were vulnerable. They chose them because they were connected to something hidden in plain sight. The realization hit Harris with both relief and dread. If the killer was targeting the foundation intentionally, then this was not senseless violence. It was retribution or exposure. But it also meant the killer was not working alone in darkness. They were embedded in a shadow or the rest of the city was blind to. Harris leaned back in his chair as the clock on the wall ticked quietly toward midnight. The stakes had changed. The murders were not the end of the story. They were the beginning. And as he stared into the half-lit office, he knew that Chapter 5 was going to pull him deeper than he had ever gone before. Detective Harris stared at the stack of files spread across his desk, his eyes gritty from a night without sleep. He had found a connection, one powerful enough to reshape everything he knew about the case. 4 victims, seemingly unrelated in their personal lives, had all worked directly or indirectly for the same private foundation. A foundation that presented itself as charitable, benevolent, and dedicated to public improvement, while beneath the surface its financial records hinted at dealings that no legitimate organization needed to hide. Harris had seen corruption before, but not like this. This felt deeper, older, rooted into the structure of the city in a way that made it almost invisible unless one was already looking for it. And the killer, brutal as they were, had been looking long before the police even suspected a pattern. The killings were not simply murder. They were signals. Harris called an emergency meeting with his investigative team. The room was small, sterile, and dimly lit, filled with bleary-eyed detectives and tired analysts who had been working just as relentlessly as he had. He explained the discovery, laying out financial charts, photographs, organizational listings, and internal communication records pulled from public documentation and quiet inquiries. The reaction in the room shifted from curiosity to unease. The idea of a philanthropic titan being at the center of something suspicious was not far-fetched in theory, but to tie it to 4 homicides was something else entirely. If Harris was correct, then every step of the investigation had been taking place under the watchful eyes of people with resources beyond anything the department could immediately match. And Weiss, there was no guarantee that the killer was the only threat involved. If the victims were murdered because they had uncovered something, then the police were now dangerously close to becoming the next targets. Harris assigned his team to split into smaller groups, quietly interviewing individuals connected to the foundation. They approached former employees, city project contractors, and people who had worked alongside the victims, asking carefully structured questions. Most brushed off concerns, describing the foundation as demanding but reputable. Yet others, usually those who had left abruptly or been pushed out, told different stories. They spoke of internal disputes, sudden changes in leadership direction, pressure to manipulate project reports, and off-the-books funding for initiatives no one fully understood. One former project manager described the atmosphere as carefully controlled. People asked too many questions disappeared from meetings, reassigned or encouraged to resign. Yet no one accused the organization of anything publicly. Fear, Harris realized, was the foundation's most effective security system. But one person had decided to fight from the shadows. The killer. Days passed and the investigation moved forward like a machine struggling against its own weight. Every discovery opened 2 more unanswered questions. Harris spent long hours reading through digital archives and historical records, tracing the foundation back to its original incorporation decades earlier. The founders were wealthy business magnates who had built their fortunes in real estate, construction, and influential contracts during the city's expansion period. Harris found nothing illegal in those early years, but the foundation had grown exponentially, extending into political development, urban restructuring, and high-level infrastructure funding. It had wealth, authority, and access to databases most law enforcement agencies could not touch without a warrant. Harris understood that this was not a case that could be solved by kicking down doors. It required precision, secrecy, and a clear strategy before anyone realized how close the police were getting. In the midst of this, another message arrived. Harris found it sitting on his desk when he entered the precinct one morning, a small sealed envelope with no postage and no sign of how it had been delivered past security. His stomach tightened as he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, the same looping elegant handwriting they had recovered from the last crime scene. The message read, "You are beginning to see the edges. But the picture is not complete. Look deeper." Harris sat still, reading the sentence again and again. The killer had access. They were close enough to observe, evaluate, and react. They were not running from the investigation. They were guiding it. Harris wondered whether this was arrogance or a desperate need to expose whatever truth had driven them to murder. It was terrifying, and yet Harris could not help feeling the smallest flicker of reluctant respect. Few killers understood the system well enough to manipulate it from inside its own territory. Harris handed the note to the forensic handwriting expert, but he already expected what the report would show. The killer had been increasingly careful. No prints, no residue, no DNA. A ghost with the hand of a scholar and the mind of a strategist. Harris returned to his board, staring at the photos of the victims. They had each worked on different projects, but every project eventually led to a single vault of funding approvals signed by the same high-ranking board member. That name belonged to a man who rarely appeared in public, whose position was quiet but powerful, the type of executive who preferred to operate behind the scenes. Harris began digging into his background, searching through land records, voting histories, political connections, former lawsuits, and media appearances. On paper, the man was clean, disciplined, respected in business and government circles. But Harris had investigated long enough to know that people who looked perfect on record were often the ones who had buried the most. 2 nights later, Harris sat in his car across the street from the Foundation headquarters, watching the building glow under the city lights. Employees left one by one, disappearing into taxis, rideshares, and parked vehicles. The board member he had been focusing on emerged last, escorted not by bodyguards, but by a single driver who appeared unconcerned and bored. No visible security, no indication the man believed anyone was watching him. That confidence suggested either complete innocence or belief that the city itself protected him. Harris followed from a distance, recording the route as the car wove through commercial districts toward wealthier neighborhoods. He watched the board member enter a gated residence before the iron gates closed behind him. Harris sat in silence for several minutes, engine idling, trying to decide whether he was chasing a criminal mastermind or walking into a trap laid by a killer who wanted someone else blamed. Back at the station, a new report came in that shifted the investigation again. The forensic analysis of digital files recovered from one of the victim's laptops showed encrypted documents she had been collecting in the weeks before her death. When the analysts cracked the encryption, they found emails, financial ledgers, and internal memos that implied the foundation was redirecting funds through shell companies into personal investments and illicit lobbying ventures. The victims had discovered evidence, and someone inside the organization had begun tying up loose ends before anything could surface publicly. Harris stared at the decrypted files with a hollow feeling in his chest. The killer was not wrong about the corruption, but the killer had chosen murder over justice. Harris realized that if the truth came out, the killer might attempt to contact him directly again, and that contact could be the key to finally catching them. As dawn crept across the skyline, Harris stepped outside the precinct into the cold morning air. The city was beginning to wake up, unaware that every calm street light and storefront sign rested on a foundation of corruption, silence, and blood. He thought about the killer's message. Look deeper. He already was. But the truth was not just dangerous. It was close. And the moment he found it, someone was going to try to stop him. The only question now was who would reach the finish line first, the detective hunting the killer, or the killer hunting the truth behind the city that never wanted to be exposed.